I want to, you've brought in essentialism and effortless nicely there, and I'd love to just explore those in some detail. I guess you will have done many of these types of conversations before. What is it that you want to talk about around those that perhaps isn't always maybe the first chapter of the book that you talk about, or the last chapter? What's the bit that you want to speak to right now, maybe that's on your mind in either of those works? I was thinking we might go down the essentialism route, but I'm happy to go where you want to go. What do you think is a topic that maybe isn't spoken enough about in this stuff that you've written?
Okay, so there's a couple of ways of thinking about that. I mean, at time of this conversation, Essentialism, I mean, literally, we just have come out with the 10th anniversary edition of Essentialism. So it has a new introduction that I wrote for that, and a 21-day challenge that comes along with it. So, it's tools, because people need tools to be able to implement these. I need tools to implement them in my life. So one thing that I think is a new reflection, because I've just had it, is to sort of look at, well, on the one hand, look how essentialism has become a part of the zeitgeist in its own small way. I mean, it's gone out to millions of people now. It's in 40 languages. Every day I'm hearing from people that feel it impacted their life, maybe even changed their life, and then it has opened up many opportunities to do things that would have been impossible without it. We just finished yesterday a strategy session with the entire leadership body of the SEALs community, and this is one of the most elite organizations in the world, and they're facing very high stakes situations themselves. You pause on that and you just think, well, this matters. This is important work, and so it's been life-changing for me to be a part of essentialism, and to see it, just to see these moments that happen that in a sense I'm not a part of, even though you're a part of it. I'm thinking, Kanye West is missing. And then suddenly on social media, he's posting the contents page of Essentialism. Wherever he is, that's what he's reading.
Yes.
That was a strange moment. Just happened just recently, where Ersk, am I saying his name right? Ersk, who from the Ukraine, who just fought Tyson Fury to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Posted with his team in the plane on the way to the fight. He was holding a copy of Essentialism. I mean, these moments, and there's lots of moments like that you just think, I don't know. It's humbling. It's strange. You don't have control over ideas once you publish them. It's one of the odd things about writing. And then on the flip side of that, I think, well, it's more relevant now than ever. The world is tilted who knows where. It seems to have grown in relevance in that sense. The level of noise we're inundated with is higher, and so I sort of imagine this future where essentialism will just continue, even if I didn't become better at being able to provide the tools and the help and the platform to help people. I think it would just go on, and so but I want to do better in being able to help people. I want to be able to do better in being able to lead a movement that can reach people where they are. And so that's sort of, I suppose those are my thoughts on essentialism that I can only just now share, because they're just barely, we're at the 10-year mark now. And in terms of effortless, thank you. It's kind of that. In terms of effortless, the thing I want to do better at sharing about effortless is, and I've mentioned it already momentarily, but it's about simplification. That's what it's about in a single word. Essentialism is about focus, figuring out what's essential, eliminating what's non-essential. This is essentialism. That's the spirit of it, the disciplined pursuit of less. But even after you focus and you go, okay, this is what matters, you still have to do it in the right way. Otherwise, you will burn out before you achieve what matters most. You can still do what matters most in a way that damages people, that damages yourself, that damages the relationships around you, that damages your chances of success. And so to find, to be able to simplify, and I feel a growing sense of fight in me to do something about that and to bring effortless thinking to more people, because unnecessary complexity is everywhere and it's such a burden. And it's more than a burden like, oh, that's irritating. It's way, way worse than irritation. It is.
Yeah.
I think it taps into like a moral curse, or at least there is a deep and moral argument that can be made for eliminating unnecessary complexity. You talk to a mother with young children who is trying to get their school, or they're on the customer service call, and the levels of unpaid work that they're required to go through is immoral. It's not just irritating, it's immoral, and it's hugely demoralizing for people. And it's not accounted for anywhere. The corporation, I've worked with hundreds of corporations. That is literally true. But I'm no corporatist. I don't believe corporations are the solution to our society. They're a function, they're a part of it, and they can do good, but they could do lots of harm, and unnecessary complexity is like that. And so figuring out ways that we can help corporations and teams to eliminate unnecessary complexity for customers, and for themselves, their own team, internal teams, and for individuals to be able to do that in their own lives so that they can actually do what matters most, but not have that sensation of everything being hard all the time. I think that's a moral mission. I think that's worth doing something about.
Powerful. I haven't read the book yet, so I've read most of Essentialism. I haven't got to the end of it yet, but in preparation for this call. But I've got Effortless on the desk next to me here. It's on the next stack of books to read. And I look forward to that. That inspires me to want to pick it up and dig into it. I need that.
So one of the things that inspired me to write Effortless was a book called The Collapse of Complex Societies. And it's not a well-known book, but it's by a historian. His name's Joseph Tainter, and he proffers that every society collapses for the same reason. So every society that collapses for the same reason. So whereas most historians make would argue, well, Rome collapsed for this reason, and Greece collapsed for that reason, and the Maya civilization for another reason, one from war, one from civil unrest, one from disease. He says, no, it's all the same thing. On the outside, the symptom looks different. The challenge that actually brought them down looks different. But internally, what happens is that you solve problems by increasing complexity. And you do that until you get to a point where you're using your entire resource set to maintain the complexity. And so you actually produce at a high level of, in a sense, at a high level of sophistication, you've created a very fragile, sophisticated system. So it can't handle whatever the next big challenge is. And that's true as an individual, in a relationship, as a family, as a team, as an organization, as a society, a country. You become vulnerable and cannot handle the next thing. And if you look at most developed countries now, I think that there are lots of symptoms that fit with what I'm describing. And you look at the tax code in most developed nations. That I don't know. I think they are immoral. I think it's immoral to have that level of complexity. That you have to hire people and spend, in some ways, quite considerable sums of money and time, not to pay your taxes, but just to understand what you're supposed to pay in your taxes. And that's just one tiny illustration. There's nobody in charge of simplification in government. Nobody. There's like not a single person whose job that is. And so, of course, the longer you go, the worse it gets. We could go on, but you get the idea.
So, yeah, I do, and I the life application is immediately applicable. I also see it with clients I work with in highly regulated environments, banking, finance, pharmaceuticals, this type of thing, which you understand. And I guess that's one of the things I just want to push on a little bit there is like, I guess post global financial crisis, for example, the regulators say, right, we have to, there's a groundswell, we must increase the level of control or compliance or regulation to stop that from happening again. And it feels like there's layers of complexity that are added there. I guess what advice would you give to policymakers to get that right? Because there's almost like the baying crowd saying, you must, lock all the bankers up and let's regulate so this doesn't happen again. But that, the long-term consequences of that, I'm not sure are particularly positive. But equally, we don't want the maybe kind of reckless behaviour that others can get away with and cause harm by. So any thoughts on that element?
I'm in a world-class choir, and that's also because of Anna primarily. I just get to be in it because she's so talented as a musician, an artist, and maybe I shouldn't have led with that because of the story I'm about to tell. But there was a situation where, strangely, at one of the performances, somebody joined the choir who's not in the choir, right? Like they just turned up, they had learned the music, they were dressed in the new correct outfit. And of course, you can't just have somebody that's unknown to everybody or not, for lots of safety reasons, that isn't a sensible thing to proceed with. But of course, the people around him immediately were like, oh, who are you? Yeah, why are you here? Let's talk about it. And then it became clear that he needed to be exited out of the concert. Okay, that's what happened. In response to that, a new security badge system was implemented. So now at every practice, you have to wear your security badge, right? And the reason is because of security and because of this situation that took place. And so you want to protect the members of the choir, and you want to protect the youth that are involved in this massive choir, and so on. And all of this sounds good. But if you created a Venn diagram, I did create actually. If you said, okay, in the first Venn diagram, here is the problem that existed, right, as I've described it. And then you can say, in the next part of the Venn diagram, you can say the degree to which a security tag was necessary to solve the problem, right? And there's no overlap between those two. Nobody had security badges, and yet the problem was solved. So you didn't need security badges to solve that problem. Okay, now the third circle is, does having the security badges avoid the problem? Like going forward, does it solve the problem? And the answer to that is no, there's no overlap there either, at least in my analysis. So now you have a solution that was not necessary to solve the problem in the first place and would not solve the problem in the future, because these are very low tech security badges. There's no buzzing in, there's no, so I carry mine. I almost never put it on, and nobody ever asks me. And the reason they don't ask me is because they know me and I know them, and that's the security. That's what caused the security. That's how you produce security in the first place, was people knowing each other. So if you wanted to increase the security, what you need to do is get people to know each other better. So then if there's somebody there, the antibody is the actual community knowing and being able to immediately address the concern. Like that's a higher level of security. I'm using this as a metaphor for what happens so very often in attempts to make things better. We make things worse in our attempt to make them better by adding unnecessary complexity. Now, I am not saying the world isn't complex and you can just have everything be simple. It's like, obviously, the world is extremely complex already. I mean, not already, I mean like inherently. There's many, many layers of complexity. If you have humans and you have a world and you have an ecosystem, it's complex. But unnecessary complexity is that complexity that does not solve the problem it's intending to solve, or it does it in a clumsy way, or it makes things worse because you have it. And so my advice, yes, going to to people that are actually trying to write the regulations, is understand the real problem that you are trying to solve, not the pressure from other people to announce something, not people who don't understand what's going on writing the rules. That's not helpful, because again, you can just create something that doesn't solve the problem, just makes a whole bunch of things harder. I'm not saying all regulation is bad. I'm saying make sure you're addressing the right issue first. C.S. Lewis put it beautifully. He said, what you want to do, in the Screw Tape Letters, he's trying to encourage the minor devils to be able to go and get the church-going Christians and corrupt them in some way, make their lives more difficult. Yes. He said the key thing you need to do, he said, one of the key things now is you want them running around busy. He said, particularly what you want is them running around with fire extinguishers in time of flood. And I love that phrase. I mean, I love it for how awful it is. But so many efforts are like that, running around with fire extinguishers in time of flood, not addressing the real issue. And if you can, it's like a mathematical formula. You can take all the talent, you can take all of the time, effort, money. I mean, you can make a list of all the resources you could possibly hope for. And then if you multiply it by the wrong issue, address the wrong issue, then of course no good comes, and actually a lot of bad comes. It's like multiplying it by zero. I mean, you're going to get nothing for all of that, and that's the best case scenario, because if you're addressing the wrong issue, you can do a lot of damage. Damage. I mean, I'm talking we're talking big level regulations and so on. But I mean, just a one-on-one conversation with my daughter, with my son, with my wife, if I try and give them advice before I understand, if I'm dealing with the wrong issue, if I haven't got through, peeled back some of those layers, I can be irrelevant, or I can do a lot of damage. And those are kind of my options. And so yeah, that would be my advice.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. Now, you've been very generous with your time. There was one area I just want to pick up on, which was a really lovely experience when we were on holiday in the summer. My family and I, as we were driving, we listened to a couple of episodes of the podcast where you were speaking to a friend of yours, Sam Bridgestock, with regards to his terminal cancer diagnosis and his choices around that.
What I want to do with Sam, what I have tried to do, I wouldn't have given him this language, but he came to a birthday event for me, and one of the things he shared was look, to the group, he just said, look, Greg has got in the pit. He got in the pit with me, and I know exactly what he means by it, and I know why he's saying it, and one of the reasons he's saying it is because so few people do it. That's why. And I understand. I'm not feeling critical when I say it. I understand why people don't want to get in the pit, because being in the pit, you feel and are experiencing a degree of what the person is experiencing, and you're doing it again and again and again and again and again, and you're having the highs and you're having the lows. And of course, it's easier and tempting to just remove yourself so you can move on with your own life, and you don't, and to sort of protect yourself against it. But or just to give advice.
Yeah.
Like that's just what somebody wants when they're suffering.
just grateful for the dialogue that you had together, and you made that as a public thing, which could have easily been a very private conversation. And I appreciated his insights. And it was amongst other things, I was really interested about the important role that routines played in terms of him continuing to work for the benefit of himself and his family. And it was a very interesting, it hit an interesting time for me, because I established a pattern of, or tried to establish a pattern of working of something I called die days, which were Fridays, where it was, what would I do if I knew I had terminal illness, and I realized actually I probably would still carry on working a lot, because that was what was happening in practice. And there was some comfort in hearing him say, actually, that was still a very important part of his routine, a part of who he was, and finding meaning for him and his family. And it's interesting that resonated with me at the moment. It wasn't the most important thing you were discussing. I do acknowledge
yes, but I understand what you're saying.
For me as a listener, it kind of was something that was quite, it really resonated with me that he would say that, rather than say, no, I've given up work, I've stopped working, I'm staying at home and all that kind of thing. And I thought that was a really interesting point around where meaning is found for me. And it was a big takeaway from me listening to that conversation, amongst other things. So again, gratitude to you both to be courageous enough to bring that into the public sphere. I just want to acknowledge how much I appreciated that dialogue. Yeah.
I mean, look, let's say all virtues work in pairs. And if you don't know the paired virtue, then you won't actually have a virtue, because it's missing its the key that fits the lock of that principle. And so, I mean, we can see this in great in great philosophical principles of justice and mercy. If you only understand justice, of course you'll behave a certain way. If you only understand mercy, then you'll act in a certain way, and then neither of those will be our virtues without the other. Total justice or total mercy, then neither of those are virtues. It's exactly the tension between them, and finding the right tension between the two, that makes each of them a virtue. And I think that's that wasn't an interesting part of our conversation. That to live essentialism, even under that extreme situation that he's in, reveals, well, you need both. You need to balance investing time with his wife and his family, and in contributing else, beyond that, precisely because those things give each meaning, precisely because
yes.
you wouldn't give the advice to your children, just spend all of your time sitting in this room together with us. I mean, literally all day long. We should just sit here talking, playing games from now for the next 10 years. I mean, you'd never say that. But in some ways, when people talk about death thinking, right, they tend to talk like that, as if, well, remember,
yes.
if you were going to die today, they're trying to take a principle to its extreme, then you would just, all of these things would fade away, and all you'd be left with is just your relationships and so on. And it's like, well, yes and no. I mean, I think that if you were going to die today, yes, it would definitely put into perspective that some people matter a lot more than other people. I agree with that. But you might have responsibility beyond those people. Your life touches many people beyond, and I think it's that tension between contribution to the people who matter most and contribution to people out there that helps give meaning to our lives and to them in this sort of in the community of contribution.
In my own small world, it also triggered me to change the title of my this time that I'd allotted to kind of to recover, to renew, and to recharge, to a preparation day rather than a die day. And it was actually it kind of triggered me to reframe what I wanted that time for. And it's actually been a helpful mental kind of shift for me in terms of how I'm shielding that time and making sure that I'm using it as productively as useful as possible. Greg, I feel like I could take a lot more of your time, and in the disciplined pursuit of less, I want to stop right now for your benefit, and more than mine perhaps. But I'm really grateful for the wisdom that you've shared today, and the things that you're imparting to the world are really valuable, and doing it in a way that is humble and connects really well with me, I know, and clearly with millions of others. So thank you for making time for this conversation today. It's much appreciated. I'd love to just ask you in closing if there's something that you've articulated